Good afternoon, my name is Clara Reiter and we are here today at the COVID-19 Center in Windhoek. We are going to be speaking about the Namibian Youth Response regarding the COVID-19 crisis we have at the moment. We do have Honorable Emma Kantema Gomez here today with us, who is the Deputy Minister of the Sport, Youth and National Service. We also do have Ms. Alsarine Katitia, who's the Vice Chairperson of the Board of National Youth Council of Namibia. We also do have Ms. Denia Gale here, and she is the Namibian representative of the United Nations Population Fund. So please stay tuned, have a look what we have for you today. Thank you.
Welcome to the COVID-19 Communications Center, where we ensure that the Namibian nation is up to date with the efforts of the Namibian government in curbing the further spread of COVID-19 in the country. Today we will see the launch of the 13th National Youth Week by the Minister of Sports, Youth and National Service, Honorable Agnes Chongarero, and a panel discussion by our panelists that I will introduce a bit later. I would now at this juncture like to call the Minister of Sports, Youth and National Service to come give us her remarks and launch the National Youth Week.
Good afternoon, dear Namibian youth, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. This day, the 27th of April in the Namibian Youth Development Calendar, is known as the National Youth Day, as provided for by Section 45 of the National Youth Council Act 3 of 2009. In addition to this day, the entire week is dedicated to the observation of the National Youth Week. The occasion has its roots on a resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, which was taken on the 12th of August. For the past 12 years, the National Youth Day and Week have been observed through gatherings of between 300 and 600 young Namibians from all walks of life. At this occasion, young people together with stakeholders highlight and advocate for solutions on issues that affect their daily lives. Needless to say, this year, we are observing the 30th National Youth Week at a very difficult time when Namibia and the rest of the world are battling with the fight against COVID-19. The nature of the state of affairs dictates that business cannot be as usual. Figures as observed from countries where COVID-19 is at another level shows that death rate among young people is as low as 0.2%. This does not, however, mean that young people are not affected by COVID-19. We know for a fact that many young people's formal education has been severely impacted by the pandemic. We also know that many other young people are affected by the closure of non-formal educational opportunities, which deprives them of social engagement with their peers and educators. Equally, there's no doubt that young people in the business arena are economically affected by the non-conducive environment as a result of COVID-19. It is a fact that prolonged periods of closures and restrictions of movements may lead to additional emotional unrest and anxieties among young people. However, young people exposed to COVID-19 are as likely as old people to become infected also. Therefore, despite the negative social and economic effect associated with the closure and restriction of movement, young people should be patient and strictly follow national guidelines around screening, testing, and care, as well as practice of social distancing. The government of the Republic of Namibia, which with local and international support is doing everything in its power to ensure the health and safety of the Namibian people. In addition to the lockdown, which is aimed at the containment of the virus, the government and its agencies introduced several stimulus packages to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Some of these are Emergency Income Grant, the SME Package, and SSC Economic Stimulus Package, and all these and many others benefit also the Namibian youth. Specifically, the Ministry of Sport, Youth and National Service is mandated to ensure that the youth in Namibia become functional, productive, and patriotic citizens who can access and exercise their political, economic, and social rights, opportunities, and responsibilities fully. This can be meaningfully attained through coherent and meaningful leadership and participation of young people. At the end of the day, the turnkey solution of COVID-19 lies in the hands of human beings. Our behaviors, our movements, and our circumstances, all of which depends on getting everyone to play their part. I'm informed that many young people here in Namibia and else have come up with innovative ways to fight COVID-19, while some have gone out of their ways to provide for those who are less fortunate during this difficult time in their lives. Hence, as a young sector, we dedicate our efforts to contribute to the fight against the deadly virus through an initiative called the Namibian Youth Response to COVID-19. The Ministry of Sport, Youth and National Service, in partnership with the National Youth Council of Namibia, with technical and financial support from UNFPA, GIZ, UNDP, and UNICEF, is fine-tuning the modalities for rolling out an initiative to support young people's efforts to safely and effectively act as agents of change in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. As we fine-tune the initiative, we remain cognizant of the number of important elements that need to be taken into consideration. These are, amongst others, ensuring that young people are adhering to social distancing and other safety measures in line with the Ministry of Health and WHO guidelines. The National Youth Council, in particular, through its regional youth structures, will soon be embarking on a 4-day door-to-door campaign under which 4 youth per constituency, that is 484 across the country, will be mobilized to support this initiative on a voluntary basis. The purpose of the initiative is to convey correct messages on COVID-19 by educating young people and for them to educate their friends, families, and their communities. With these remarks, I am pleased to officially launch the 13th National Youth Day and Week under the theme, the Namibian Youth Response to COVID-19. Stay safe and save a life. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Sports, Youth and National Service, for officially launching the National Youth Week, the 13th National Youth Week, under the theme, the Namibian Youth Response to COVID-19. In her remarks, the Minister she read to us and made clear that there are challenges facing young people. Young people are affected significantly by this pandemic. Our panel today will further unpack the theme for this year's 13th National Youth Week and give us a status on what will Namibia look like, what is Namibia going to be like post-COVID-19 for young people. Our panel is Ms. Denia Gale, the country representative for the United Nations Population Fund, Honorable Emma Kantema Gaumas, the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Sports, Youth and National Service, and Ms. Elserine Katiti, the Vice Chairperson of the National Youth Council Board. Firstly, I think I would like to note that we have an all-female panel today. It's quite impressive, and it's reminding us again that the country is moving towards gender equality and women empowerment. I would first perhaps ask the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Sports, Youth and National Service to unpack the theme for us for the National Youth Week this year and give us a general overview of what is the status, how are the young people affected by this pandemic?
Good afternoon, moderator, my fellow panel members, and the listeners as well as our viewers. As the Honorable Minister for Sport, Youth and National Service, we've just now launched the National Youth Week. I just want to unpack the theme for the week, for the Youth Week. And before I do that, I just want to take a step back and to perhaps explain why the National Youth Council is embarking on that initiative. As you have heard, the National Youth Council is established by an Act of Parliament, and one of the main functions of the Youth Council is to foster among the Namibian a youth that has a spirit of national identity, a sense of patriotism, unity, self-awareness, as well as the depth awareness of social, economic, political, educational, and cultural prospects and adversities. This now then derives from where the youth are heading towards in terms of their responsibilities for patriotism and in their quest to be change actors to fight the COVID-19 that the world and Namibia is faced with. The National Youth Council has then identified the theme. And the theme speaks for itself, and as it was alluded to already in the speech, the youth will then embark on the 4-day youth volunteerism work, where they will be going door to door to disseminate the information. And in terms of how the youth are affected by this COVID pandemic, I just want also to mention that the Ministry of Sport, Youth and National Service also has that mandate of sport. And apart from the youth being affected in terms of the economic, in terms of the social, the sports sector, I think, is also one of the most hard-hit sector. We are aware that most of our athletes derive their livelihood from sport, and now they are facing financial distress because of the suspension of the sports activities. So in short, the youth, in fact, being obviously the majority of our population, is the most hard-hit sector.
Thank you so much, Honorable Emma Kantema Gaumas. I would like to ask Ms. Gale, perhaps, noting what Honorable Deputy Minister has said, a lot of young people are now not having access to their SRHR services that assist them in ensuring that they are practicing safe sex, they are able to protect themselves from STDs, etc. What is the current status quo on young people and adolescents accessing their SRHR services?
Thank you very much. I think let me start by commending the ministry and the young people in Namibia through the NYC and the different networks for really availing this space for young people to have a say and participate in this response. I think it speaks to the idea that we need all hands on deck and everybody needs to be part of this response. What is a reality is that the health system indeed might be stretched in terms of responding to COVID and also responding to the other health needs in the country. But I think what we need to assure young people is that the services are available, and if they need them, they should access those services. It's a reality. It might be slow. They might have to adhere to additional protocols to access the health facilities, but that should not deter them from really seeking the services. That said, I think the Ministry of Health and its partners have also put in place a number of mechanisms to ensure that the services are available. One is that we are working with the Ministry of Health. I think WHO, UNICEF, and UNFPA is working with the Ministry of Health to look at some guidelines and protocols just to guide some of the health workers in what do they need to do differently in times of COVID and still manage to provide services for young people. The other thing that we're doing is that we are making sure that the health workers have the information, the correct information to partake those. So we're doing some training, virtual training for the health workers. And another thing that we're doing is that we're working with some of the NGOs, with NAPA and Society for Family Health, to also use mobile clinics that will go into the communities and provide services as well, particularly for those young people that might have difficulties accessing directly the services. And then the last thing is really around the adequate information to the young people. So we're putting out quite a bit of pamphlets and guides, and you would see some interesting things coming through on social media that the young people are so good at using to provide them with adequate information as to what services and where can they find those services. So there's a lot going on, and the most important thing is for young people to know that the services are available and they should access them. Maybe a little bit different because everything is different in light of COVID today, but services are available.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gail. I think my next question will then be to you, El Serene. What is the custodian of young people, the National Youth Council, doing to ensure that young people understand what is happening, they understand the severeness of this pandemic and what ramification can come from it, and they are observing the measures that are in place to ensure that everything is happening, that they are observing the safety measures in place?
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, I think I should perhaps allude to the Namibian Youth, Happy Namibian Youth Day, of course, and the launch of the 13th National Youth Week. As the custodian of youth, I think we have to understand that locally as well, globally, young people are the highest demographic currently, as well as the least affected demographic. And the efforts of the National Youth Council is again to ensure that we're raising awareness among young people, ensuring that they're given information, but at the same time alluding to them the spirit of volunteerism, going out there, ensuring that they are the first people that adhere to the protocols that are put out there by the World Health Organization, as well as our Ministry of Health, the efforts that the country is actually putting in place, and that we are the ones that are running with those said activities. We are also, of course, in the process, and I think this is a great time that the country as well as globally, there are great measures of collaboration among different stakeholders. And as has been mentioned by our minister, we have collaborated with, UNDP, UNFPA, GIZ, as well as other youth affiliates, because I think this is a great time to use youth affiliates who we know are in constituencies, are in regions, to enforce that we are adhering to the standards that are set out there. So there's a lot of effort that is happening, but we are also, again, as a council, calling for more collaboration and for more young people to come on board and actually assist all the stakeholders in ensuring that we reach more young people and that we are the forerunners in the prevention of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Al-Sareen. I think I want to also just remind our viewers from home that we have a call line where you can call in to ask the questions you'd like to ask our panelists. The number is 061 400 397. I repeat, 061 400 397. While we're waiting for the callers to call in, perhaps Honorable Emma Kantema, you can just tell us, looking at how a lot of the activities that the ministry had planned are now being stopped because we are on lockdown, young people cannot access these services or these programs can't go ahead. How is the ministry responding to that? For example, the training of the youth that at the centers in the regions that has 70% practical work that needs to be done and 30% theoretical work. And we are now moving towards online learning as the Ministry of Education has decided. How is the Ministry of Sports, National Youth Service, National Youth Service responding to this? How are we ensuring that the young people who needed to complete these courses are going to complete their courses, or what is the plan of the ministry?
Yeah, thank you. Like all other institutions that are involved in higher learning, our ministry do provide several training in terms of basic skills training, and then also the short courses that are offered at our multiple youth resource centers. And as we all are aware that due to the state of emergency that was declared by His Excellency, we have suspended the training that was offered. And I think here I want to mention that when it comes to training, we normally cater for the out-of-school youth who are unable to obtain admission at the tertiary institutions. And also, in addition to that, the short courses that are offered are like your tailoring. That is really to provide basic skills, your computer literacy, to ensure that the youth are employable or to ensure that the youth are able to employ themselves. But now, as we all know, that this pandemic do present us with opportunities and as well as challenges that we can improve on how we present our offerings to the youth. And as I mentioned earlier, we are also then affected in terms of our inability to conduct this training. And as a ministry, we are devising strategies in our efforts to ensure that we still do continue to deliver on this mandate, even though we know it's proving challenges, but we are working towards to see how we can best put in measures that can allow for online. But I have to mention here that our training, the major part of it is mostly the practical teaching. So hence, really those challenges to see how we mitigate. But we are also talking to other stakeholders. We are looking at how NTA are going to come up with these measures to see how best we still continue to deliver training, because I know in terms of the vocational, it requires a lot of practical, it requires work integrated learning. So this is indeed one of the challenges that we are battling with, and hopefully we will be able to come up with some solutions. But in the meantime, for now, our centers are closed for teaching.
Okay. Ms. Gale, I think you want to say something to add to that.
Yeah, I think that it is a reality that when we look at this pandemic, it started out as a public health crisis. And what we have seen is that it has morphed into something else, right? It has morphed into something that is affecting us from the human side, the social side, the economic side, and therefore it's going to require responses at all those levels, and not just as a public health factor. So I think one of the two things that I think we have to keep in mind, one is that we have to begin to understand that and this is why I think a week like this is important, because we have to let young people own the response to this. They have to feel like they're part of the actions that are being taken, and understand why the actions are being taken and how it's going to impact their life. And then for us, those that work to promote the well-being of young people, to also balance out and cushion some of the hit that the young people are going to get with this. And so that's why I appreciate also the economic package that have been put in place, because we have to find a balance to also help to cushion some of this. The second thing is that we're going to have to tap into the ingenuity of young people in order to find some of these solutions. I will say to the young people, those that are home and they cannot access the centers because they're closed, call one or two of their friends, have a discussion about what can we do. They can't find hand sanitizers in the world. Can we come up with something? We seem to be able to not find masks in the world. What can we do? So let's encourage the young people also to pull out their ingenuity and start coming up with some of the answers to these challenges that this pandemic has confronted us with.
Thank you, Ms. Gail, telling us there that young people must come up with answers to the questions that nobody has answers to right now. We have a shortage of hand sanitizers, we have a shortage of masks. Let's be creative as young people and come up with ways to make our own masks, to make our own hand sanitizers like UNAM has been doing. I think, Elserine, my next question is to you. Looking that institutions of learning are closing or are closed at the moment, this brings another challenge. Young people are now at home, and some of them will not be able to come back to school. And we will see an increase in out-of-school youth. How is the National Youth Council, again, I remind you, it's the custodian of young people. So what are we doing, or what is the National Youth Council doing to ensure that this young people go back to school, or we at least accommodate them somehow once they drop out of school?
Okay. Thank you again. Okay. You know, it's no doubt that young people will face economic hardships as well as developmental shortcomings because of the pandemic. Especially if they are not taking part in public systems, in this case, especially the system of education. But then again, I think that this is also a great time again for young people to get together and actually sit down and say, what can we do about it? Again, I mentioned that we are the highest demographic, not just locally, but globally. About over 61% of the world's population is young people. And it is time. COVID-19 has sort of opened our eyes as planners, as policy developers, as leaders, as well as young people, to see how we can improve on our, for example, our monitoring and evaluation of our education systems, the monitoring and evaluation of our public systems. And it's time that we actually also invest in alternative forms of education. As has been mentioned, you know, by our panelists, we have to look at various ways of seeing how, but in terms of what the Youth Council is doing about it, we are planning on engaging with our youth affiliates, that especially, because there are various youth groups that are affiliated to the Youth Council that are focusing on different sectors. Some is political sectors, some is, political sectors, some is education, and we're going to see how we can empower and strengthen our efforts in ensuring that young people, especially young people who are out of youth, who are out of school, can actually also be incorporated into the system. And I think this is a time for us to think more creative and widely, and not just to think on what are our formal education systems, but rather ensuring and also expanding into the rural, because now is our time to actually see how the rural populace, especially the young populace, is affected. So we will see how we can come up with alternative methods of education, as well as see how we can strengthen collaborations with other stakeholders. But I think the answers should also be coming from young people on the ground, because we have to come up with the answers for ourselves. What is it that we can do as a group of 5 young people, for example, in one of the constituencies in the Omaika region? What is it that we can do as more privileged young people in the Khomas region? So we have to continue, and the Youth Week will actually allow for us to continue the discussions on how we can become solution bearers during this time.
Thank you, Elserine. Let me ask you another question before I move to the other panelists, because you just brought that into my... Okay. just a minute. We have a caller, Marvin from Windhoek. Marvin? Marvin, hello? Perhaps? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, Marvin, you're live.
All right.
What is
Good
your
afternoon to the nation. My question is, as people are opening quarantine, especially here at Ramatex Youth Service, what are the procedures that one as a Namibian youth has to follow if you are looking to be employed for the temporary or for the moment, just to help out?
Marvin, please just repeat your question again. I don't think it was clear.
What are the criteria that one has to follow? As now people spoke that at Ramatex they might open, might be open for quarantine people to be held there. Now, as youth that are roaming around the street, what can we do to be part of this helping system?
Marvin, am I getting your question correct that you're asking how can young people assist at the
Yes.
quarantine facilities?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And one more.
Yes.
I was this morning at this high school that was opened recently in Chomuse for the people that were not replied or that were rejected via this grant money. And we were chased by the police this morning. The councillors never pitched up there. People were writing names on a piece of paper. Why is it the lawmakers they cannot come down to the grass level and come speak to us? The lawmakers, why can't they make it out to the people themselves and come talk to us face to face? Am I clear?
Yeah, thank you so much for your questions, Marvin.
All right, I'll be listening.
Thanks. Marvin's second question was why are our leaders not coming at a grassroots level to listen to the problems of the constituents? I think that was the question that he asked second.
Okay, perhaps to help answer Marvin's question, he does understand the context within which we are currently. The whole entire country is in a lockdown. The regions are isolated, the towns are isolated, and I think in this week's or in last week's address of the different governors, they were talking about how they have different initiatives within the regions in terms of, economic incentives, agricultural incentives, and seeing as how young people can also contribute. So perhaps wherever you find yourself as a young person, if you can maybe approach, of course, again, adhering to the regulations that are put in there, let us be the custodians, as we're saying. Let us go out there and find out what is it that my governor in my constituency is doing, and how then can I, as a young person, contribute, instead of just, sitting and asking questions. But I think young people should always be encouraged that when you're asking a question, also have an alternative answer, because it's not all of us that think the same. And that is the beauty of the moment that we are in right now, collective effort and collective thinking in continuing and solving the problems that we are having.
Do any of the other panelists want to answer the second question? But also let's remember the first question that he asked. Marvin wants to volunteer at the quarantine facilities and he's asking how can he do that? Where does he need to go? Who does he need to approach for him to get involved?
Maybe just to attempt to answer the first question, the minister in her address when launching the Youth Week, she did mention that within weeks, we are just finalizing the modalities. We'll be conducting the door-to-door campaign. So perhaps that also presents him with an opportunity to then see how he can participate in this process. This is one of the processes where we are calling for youth to volunteer and come out and really fight the COVID-19 pandemic. So perhaps at this stage, he can then do so. Or alternatively, he can also contact the Ministry of Health and Social Services, who's the custodian of driving this process. So they will be able to assist. But then coming also to Mervin's second question, I'm not so sure if he referred to the income, the EIG, the grant because he did allude to the issue of the youth, the leaders not coming to the ground. But I'm sure, as El Sarin has indicated, the governors are accessible. So I also then encourage him to reach out to the governors or the Ministry of Finance in terms of the issues that is pertaining to the stimulus package that was introduced a few weeks back.
And I think if I can add, and the Honorable Minister said it in her remarks also, that we probably need to have a little bit of patience. We are in a national lockdown right now, and therefore we cannot allow the young people to just go out like that. There are measures and protocols that are in place. So even after the lockdown, because COVID is going to be here for a while, it's not going to go away magically, so we still have to adhere to these protocols. We want our young people to go out and volunteer and contribute, but then we have to make sure that they have the right protective gears, that they're protected, that they're safe, that they have the right information to protect themselves and also protect those that they're going to be working with as well.
And maybe also, sorry, additional...
We just have a caller, Johannes from Windhoek is on the line. Johannes, hello.
Yes.
Yes, you're live.
All right. So good afternoon to the panelists. I only want to know, and if I listen clearly, that the Ministry of Youth and Sport, so it has plenty of activities. How inclusive are they, those activities? Let me say, for example, in terms of information, how are those information accessible, for example, to people with disabilities? So that's the first question. And the second question would be like, we tend to be...
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, we just missed Johannes. Johannes, please call again and finish up your question, but I think we got the first part of your question. Ms. Gale, if you could perhaps attempt to answer the question, and any of the other panelists.
Yes, just to let Johannes know that most of the materials that have been produced to disseminate the pamphlets, all of these are also being produced in Braille for people that are visually impaired. And we are also putting out some videos and information on WhatsApp and social media by sign language as well. So the information is definitely going to be tailored to the needs of young people in their different capacities and abilities. So that has been totally taken into consideration. Also, a lot of the information have been translated into local languages. So that people can feel comfortable accessing that information in a language that they're most comfortable with. So that has been done in partnership with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Education. There's a team, there is one of the pillars of the National Response team is one that is called Risk Communication and Community Engagement. And I'm telling you, they have been hard at work making sure that this information is produced and it gets out there.
I think maybe also just adding to what Ms. Gale just mentioned, it's also worth mentioning that, especially on our National Youth Council, we do have a board member who represents the youth living with disability. So perhaps this person can also contact their respective association for any assistance as the need arises.
Thank you, Honorable. My next question is to Ms. Gale. Okay, we have another caller from Katima. Mayumo from Katima, you are live.
Okay. I just wanted to find out a little bit about the youth who did their training during 2016-2017. We know we want to contribute also, and then here we are not fully informed how is the process, taking place, because we want to intervene in where we can, but the process is the one that we are not fully informed, we are not updated. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, which office can you go to?
He's asking, they completed the courses, I think, through the Ministry of Youth Centers, and they want now to assist or to work, and especially now during the pandemic, where can they go? What can they do? I think his question is similar to the question that was asked by Marvin earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you have another question? Oh, thank you. Ms. Gale, my question was going to be, with all the information that's going around, there's also a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of propaganda, and young people are afraid. They're afraid to go to the facilities where they need to access their SRHR services. So how are we ensuring that we deal with the misinformation? How are we ensuring that young people can still come? How are we motivating them? How are we taking away the fear?
As I mentioned before, some of these materials have been produced already, and they have been produced by the team that I said that is working on this risk communication. They also has a group that is working in rumor management to really control some of this misinformation that is out there. But again, I want to assure young people, check your source of information.
Please.
Because you got something on a WhatsApp group doesn't necessarily make that truth. So question yourself before you actually resend that to another group. Because one of the things that I think we have learned with this pandemic is really that we have to substantiate what we do and what we say based on data and information and not in rumors. And so my best advice to the young people will be to check your source of information. And we have heard it here, the Ministry of Health, look at the ministry website, look at WHO, look at reputable organizations, and then use that information to inform yourself and to share with others as well.
Thank you. Honorable, just before I take questions from the media, I want to find out what is happening with the multi-purpose training centers and the skills training now in the regions where young people could escape to and use the internet facilities to study or use the gym to exercise, and now young people cannot even run outside. So what is happening with these facilities, and what is the ministry saying? How are we encouraging young people to stay fit? What's happening?
As I mentioned earlier, this is really how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted on the offerings that we provide to our youth. So unfortunately now we have closed our multiple youth resource centers that used to provide that psychosocial support for the youth. Maybe just to take you through what services we used to render at our centers, one of the key ones that Ms. Gale also referred to is the SRH, the Sexual and Reproductive Health Information. We have some of our centers, we have what we call youth-friendly clinic. And these are really some of those facilities that provide safe space for the youth. My worry is now really what is concerning us is after this pandemic, we might see unintended teenage pregnancy going up because they are unable to access the facilities. We might see also other issues that may come up, drug abuse. We might see also other issues of gender or the abuse that is happening in the GBV space. So really this is how we are affected. But again, this presents us with that opportunity to say, going forward, what are we going to put in place so that we are at least mitigating some of these risks? But since I have the time, I also just want to appreciate and comment both our callers now, the two callers who are really showing that eager to come forward and fight this COVID-19 pandemic. Because often we hear that, youth are lazy, youth are not coming forth. So now we have painted really another picture as we celebrate the 13th Youth Week to say that, look, as youth, we are the change agents. And really I want to commend, and I hope that more youth will follow to say, look, here I am. I have all the energy, I have all the creative ideas. What is it that we can do to fight this COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's also...
Okay,
is there
there's
another
another caller. The last caller, Adolphe. Adolphe,
Hello?
you're live.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
I want to pose one question to the panelists. It's regarding that if I listen attentively to the panelists, she said youth must come up with some idea of like a project. But if I remember sometimes back, there was a group of youth, Windhoek, and there was a group of youth from Havana, and they were approached the Ministry of Sport, and they wanted to upgrade their sport field, and they were told, they were turned back that no, there was no fund. But now if I listen there, the panel, one of the panels says that the youth must come up with idea or like some initiatives to do something in their community, like hand sanitizer or something. But my question is there now money ready in the coffer of the Ministry of Sport and Youth as we speak?
Okay. Mayor?
Yeah.
Okay. Kik, as has been mentioned continuously, I think nothing is going to be the same after this pandemic. Most of our financial efforts are going towards ensuring that, even the 750 that the government had disbursed is ensuring that, we are adhering and we are not contributing towards the spread of the virus. But there's something that I think quite importantly want to bring to the attention of the Namibian youth. And this is something that's, for example, also quite evident in the civil society environment. Most of the funds that come to enhance and contribute towards the project that civil society organizations do comes from international donors. Now, the way that these donors are collecting money is every individual in that country contributing $10 per month. And I know there are young people who are affected, but I think in the efforts for young people to also help out the government and the efforts that we are putting out there is to contribute, those that can contribute financially. It doesn't have to be $100 that you're giving. It can be $10 that goes towards buying a sanitizer for people who are in the informal environment. So I know we are asking, like, where is the money coming from? And we also know that our national budget has also not been, out there yet. So this is the time, and again, I'll also comment on the callers that really are showing the spirit of volunteerism within our country. So it's young people, most of them who are at home at the moment, and when you're home, you're not spending as much money. Fortunately, take from your budget that you're having and contribute towards a fund. Call the National Youth Council and say, in your efforts, I want to become a stakeholder, whether it's 3 of my friends, or whether it's my household, or whether it's me as an individual, so that we can help, enlarge the efforts that the state is putting out there. And I think that should really currently be our responsibility. As our minister has mentioned, 2.0% of young people globally are affected. That means we are in the group of people that can carry the world on our shoulders right now. So that's, I think, the efforts that as young people really we should put in place instead of asking what is the government doing and where is the money coming from.
Thank you so much, Elsarin. I would like to ask members of the media, are there any questions on the floor?
Good afternoon, Honorable. I'm Wilka Kayoko from UNREP Online. Regarding the youth that have lost their jobs or got retrenched due to the fact that companies aren't making enough profits, how are you ensuring that this part of youth is motivated not to give up? Secondly, according to the database, how many jobs have been lost by the youth during the pandemic? And since government offers jobs in the art industry, how are you looking into providing jobs for these individuals? Lastly, how are you effectively dealing with individuals that are going through mental health issues that are forced to stay indoors during the lockdown? Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the media?
Just wanted to find out something maybe from the Deputy Minister of Sports on seeing the pandemic started and there have been a lot of delegates coming here. I wanted to know what have we learned with regards to sport now? After COVID, what would we do different? And possibly when would we also have just a sports panel that would come to discuss sports matter, seeing as you said that a lot of the youth have been affected. So what would we do to those who are currently not receiving anything, apart from clubs trying to come through and different sport codes? What would we do going forward?
Okay, Honorable Deputy Minister, all the questions were directed at you.
You can shift some of them.
So I'll give you an opportunity to answer.
Thank you very much for the questions. I want to start with a question related to retrenchment. As you are aware, during the last week panel discussion, where we had the Ministry of Labor, Industrial Relation and Employment Creation on the panel, we have had the measures that they've put in place. There was a directive in terms of for the employers who intend to retrench within the period from the 28th of March when the lockdown was effective until the end of the lockdown. So the ministry is then seized with that matter. And in terms of the loss of income from the art industry, as I already mentioned, the youth are really affected in terms of the economic sector. So this, apart from the art industry, we have now just had the question on sport. So different aspects to what the youth are involved in. And also here I have to mention that the youth are also involved in a lot of entrepreneurship activities. And this is also one of the hard-hit sector. So we are looking at, as government as a whole, is looking at how we mitigate. I'm sure we have seen we've witnessed the stimulus packages that has been introduced both from the Ministry of Finance and also from Social Security Commission. So all these are government's efforts to mitigate the risks that we are faced with. The question related to sport, obviously, sport, like any other sector, continue to suffer the consequences in terms of the pandemic that we are faced with. And I think also it will continue after, because you know now the athletes have to start picking up where they left. And as I mentioned in my earlier statement, that some of the sports athletes who are now at a professional level, they derive income from this sports activity. So that's also one of the areas that is lost. But obviously, as I mentioned, we are looking at how can we devise our strategies to see post-COVID-19, how do we best provide our offerings. We have heard here that it's not going to be the same, so in the sports sector, we are of no exception.
Can
okay.
I
Ms. Gale, just quickly. We're running out of time, so I would like to ask the panelists to conclude. I mean, give us your final remarks. Obviously, we all realize things will not be the same going forward. What are we doing in our different spheres within this sector to ensure that young people are catered for and that things are smooth, or the transition is smooth on young people?
Okay.
Ms.
Can I
Gale.
come in? Yes. Okay. Two things. Maybe just to the question about, because the question came in the form of what about sports after? And I will want to say, and I add that to my concluded remark, what do we do as young people after? And I would want to suggest two things. One, we need to prepare better, yeah? Because there will be COVID or any other form of emergency or crisis in the near future, and we need to be ready. So the question is, if sport facilities close down because of an emergency, what would you do differently? And that's the kind of discussion and thinking that we should go into right now, so that we come out with this with some answer. And the other one is that we need to ensure that our systems are linked and speak to each other. Because here we are sitting with a crisis that started out being a health crisis, and now it's a crisis that it's impacting our life in so many areas. So we need to make sure that those systems speak better and that we coordinate our responses. And maybe my final comment will be, you know, this was the first year of the Decade of Action leading up to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And countries were digging in and getting ready and geared up to sprint off at our last 10 years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And then COVID showed up. What I want to say is that let's not let COVID deter us from achieving the sustainable development goals in this country. Let's dig in. We might be pushed around a little bit, and we might be tested, but this is not the time to give up. This is the time for us to revisit our effort, revisit our resources, make sure that we put those resources where they're needed the most, and that come 2030, this country can assure their people and the world that we never gave up on our commitment to achieving the sustainable development goals.
Honorable.
I think in my concluding remarks, I would like to highlight some of the learning lessons that we have learned in terms of the sports sector. As we have witnessed the loss of income due to the suspension of these activities, we were also looking at how best can we ensure that we provide social protection to the athletes. We are facing this loss of income because we have not provided the athletes or the players with this much needed social protection, and also looking at how can we enforce federations, clubs, to ensure that their members are registered as employees, employers, their members are registered with Social Security Commission, so that in cases like this, they are able to at least compensate for the loss of income. Now, in terms of the youth development part, I want to mention that youth development requires multi-sectoral, support from all the stakeholders involved. And I would like at this point really to call on our stakeholders to see how we can come together and improve on how we best empower the youth, to improve on how we enhance the youth to become employable, to become self-employed, and also very key is the issue of sexual and reproductive health, because we know the demographic dividend study that was produced in the 2018 that shows that as Namibia, our window, we still have a window to harness that demographic dividend. As El Sarin has already mentioned, we are now sitting with the highest population of the youth. So as a question now, are we going to harness this demographic dividend, or is it going to be a challenge that we are going to be faced with? So in terms of that, and the African Union has also advised countries to invest in education and empowerment initiatives to ensure that the youth are employable, or to give them that chance to employ the others. So I would like to wish the Namibian youth a productive Youth Week, and really to encourage them also to adhere to the WHO and the Ministry of Health and Social Services guidelines to stay home, stay safe, practice safe distancing, and also to ensure that we do wash our hands and sanitize regularly. Thank you.
I think for me, the lessons that we've honestly learned is that there's still so many bridges that we have to build to meet the needs of our citizens, and especially also young people. But I think also in this time, it's also important for young people, first of all, my minister told me the other day, we are not on holiday, people. And this is like the time that we can be productive. There's no other distraction that is out there. We are home. Let's become content creators. Let's innovate different ideas of how we can solve problems. And I think this is a time that as young people, we have to repeatedly tell ourselves to find new ways. Let's find new ways of doing things. Let's find new ways of expanding our education system within the rural system, within the rural structures. Let's see how we can develop new infrastructure, because this is really a time for Namibia as a country to introspect, to look back and see, whoa, this is where we have failed. This is where there are still gaps. And as young people, how can we come on board? And our Deputy Minister is talking about different stakeholders. I think oftentimes the stakeholders, we're thinking of big entities. But stakeholders are us as individuals and us as young people. So we have to ask ourselves as stakeholders. So let's find different ways of creating solutions when we are at home. And again, a happy 13th National Youth Week.
Thank you so much. As we come to the end of today's session, I would like to thank the Honorable Minister of Sports, Youth and National Service for launching the 13th National Youth Week under the theme Namibian Youth Response to COVID-19. I would also like to thank our panelists for unpacking the National Youth Week theme for us and also giving us the status of young people generally. I would also like to thank our viewers at home. We've come to the end of today's session. Please join us again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. as we discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the transportation sector. Thank you.
All right. What we heard today is that the health workers are still making sure that the youth is getting the essential services that they are. So not everything is just based on COVID-19. The youth resource centers are closed at the moment, although the online classes are still going. It's just the practical classes that are not going. They are still looking for solutions for that, so let's wait and have a look. The youth is also not only encouraged to volunteer, just maybe if you can, go have a look, ask where can you help. Also come up with new solutions, new ways, have a look, what can we do? We don't have masks, we don't have sanitizers. Get new ideas, help the government a bit. So with that, I say enjoy your National Youth Day and thank you for tuning in.